I had a very simple conversation recently that completely changed the way I think about photography in a good way. And I think it might for a lot of other people too. So we're going to talk about that today, while I also go around and scout a bit and try and take some photos, some reference images for later on in the year when the weather gets a lot more moodier than this. I'm sure it comes as no surprise what my first subject is today, as it's been in the background of the intro and probably on the thumbnail as well. This ribbon here, and I actually really like the combination of the brick and then the metal in this. We've got two sort of metal structures behind the brick structure, which gives a really nice sort of contrast of sorts. And then we've got the tree at the back as well, which looks really cool. And I guess it's pretty self-explanatory and obvious, the dirt track path that runs round and actually goes down to the building. Just fantastic to include in the front of your frame. It does get a little bit awkward from over here with the sky, but I can't get a shot with that path in because it's just such a wonderful line into the frame. Don't know how well you can see on camera. There's obviously a body of water, a stream of water that runs down through here. So I don't know whether in the winter that'll actually be flowing or not. Very dried up at the minute. Still a little bit of water in there, but if that was flowing in the winter, could make for some really nice images. Much like you're kind of seeing in the video camera here, with a lot more of this fence and wall over to this side of the frame and then pushing the ruin and the tree over to the left hand side, we can then get this perception of this wall and fence sweeping right round into the frame. Even though there's not that much curvature in the fence itself, by positioning them at either ends, we can kind of create that ourselves. Let's just move my bag and coat out of the way. Maybe stand about here and attempt to basically use the top of this metal, the very top metal bar on the fence, to lead me down into the subject. It creates this line coming from the nearest right hand side of the frame all the way into the top left where the ruin is situated. So a few years ago I was only really interested in photographing stunning landscapes and vast viewpoints, places that were pretty pristine and gave off the perception of adventure, I guess, and exploration. And the bucket list for me was pretty cliche: Iceland, Madeira and places like that. And to be honest, I wouldn't open my eyes to anything other than that. I wouldn't go out of my camera unless it was for something that fit into that criteria. And nowadays, of course, I would still love to photograph places like Iceland and Madeira, and I still will take the vast untouched landscapey shots here and there as I go about life and take photos, because at the end of the day I'm not somebody that's trying to stick a word in front of photographer. I'm not trying to be a landscape photographer. I'm not trying to be an anything photographer. I just take photos of anything, anywhere, anything that catches my fancy, and as much as possible whenever I can. I guess you could say subjects that contain some kind of sign of past or current life. So like a subject like today kind of gives us an insight into a past life, past farming industry, or it could be somewhere like a harbour town like I shot in my last video, and that shows the current fishing industry, little corners of that. And even when I do shoot in a somewhat untouched, pristine, beautiful landscape like I am today, I'm looking to include a bit of that past or current life into it, whether that be as something as small as a Wellington boot on the floor, or whether it be a big ruined building. You know, not always, not every single photo I take is going to include that, but it's just what I'm interested in the most right now and I'm gravitating towards, and it kind of pulls at my heartstrings a little bit. And this will come full circle, don't worry. I'm just setting the scene for the conversation that I had with my dad recently. That did completely change the way I view photography. So that gives you a bit of a backstory. So obviously one of the problems with being interested in photographing these types of places, like old petrol stations, old workshops, vintage old looking buildings and just farm ruins and anything like that really, is that it's 2025 and they're slowly fading away. Basically, they are all essentially fighting against time. And when I look back at photographers' work from the 80s or even the very early 90s, I'm absolutely obsessed with the subjects that they were able to capture that kind of don't really exist for us anymore. A quick cut back to the office, because obviously I didn't have this with me while I was out there in the landscape taking photos, but my dad recently bought me Peter Mitchell's Nothing Lasts Forever. Anyway, upon receiving this gift from my dad, I had a quick flick through, as you do when you receive a photo book, and page 17, not too far into the book, I stopped on this one particular image, not for any reason, it was just, I was going through the book and I stopped and I turned and I said to my dad, "Isn't it funny how years ago I was only interested in photographing these vast untouched landscapes, and now to me this is the coolest, most aesthetically pleasing, interesting photograph or types of photographs that I'm into now." I then went on to say to my dad, "Do you think modern day photographers are at a disadvantage in terms of the ones that want to photograph these types of places, like old petrol stations, for example? I'm obsessed with them, but they've nearly all vanished in the UK now." And my dad's simple response to that was, "Yeah, but petrol stations won't exist in the future. If you walked around a town and took photos of normal stuff, in 30 years, none of that's going to look the same." Essentially, what my dad was saying was, you could take photos today of stuff that seemed pretty normal, but in 10, 20, 30 years time, they might seem unique, vintage, unrecognizable, or really, really cool, because we can't see them like that anymore, because enough time has passed for them to either fade away, like the subjects I'm talking about, or for the way things are made, built, cars have all come so far that nothing looks like it did today, which makes 100% sense for most subjects out there, apart from maybe animals and stuff that are going to look the same. Sheep aren't going to change, are they? Unless they find a way to make them multicolored or something. But, or you could take a photo of a thriving modern bakery that's always got queues outside the door in a little town or a village or something, and that bakery could disappear in 10 years, 20 years, who knows? It could go out of business. They could decide, we don't want to be a bakery owner anymore, and shut shop. And then that image that you've taken of that modern bakery that's kind of normal is now a piece of history of that area. Anyway, after driving or walking around after that conversation with my dad, I found that I'm looking at certain things and photography completely differently to how I was before. In last week's video, I took this photo, and I said in that video I'd dive into why exactly that scene caught my eye. And the reason it did is, while that car is somewhat modern right now, in time that very same photo will look like the most old school car known to man. Here's another photo I took on the same morning, which previously I'd probably thought, that's a bright yellow van, and walked off. But this time was different. I thought, well, who knows whether this harbour will even be active in the future? Who knows how long this structure and shipping containers will even be here? I'm also looking back at old photos I've taken in the past and seeing them completely differently too. Here's one you may have seen in my videos recently that also includes a car, And originally when I took this, I thought, really cool image, but how I wish that was an old vintage Volvo or an old BMW parked there instead. But in X amount of years, this image will look absolutely ancient because the only thing left on the road will look like spaceships. Speaking of all those cars and stuff that were in recent images of mine, here's one in Peter Mitchell's book, the same book. When this photo was taken, that probably would have been the car on the street, you know? And now enough time has passed that this now, to me, is just ridiculously interesting, visually pleasing, unique, aesthetic, just all because of the fact that time has moved on and that's no longer the norm. Step back a bit and just get a little sliver of that building on the right hand side. Should take a photo just for reference and stuff, because just, you know, could come back in the snow. Wheel could be covered in snow. We've got to remember that these things are where they are. So when I put this in the folder at home and I look through it for somewhere to shoot, I like this door. That's better. So what's the big takeaway from all of this after I've gone on this lovely little story for you today? Well, basically all the photos we take today, next week, next month, aren't just photos of the present, they're future photos of the then past. Is that right? There'll be photos of the past in the future. Yeah, everything out there right now is a very unique window into our time as photographers for those who come after us. So I think there's a very, very high chance that future photographers and future people that just enjoy consuming photography will look back on the photos we're taking now, although to us right now they might feel very normal, but there's a very high chance they'll look back on them in the same way that I look back on photos like this with big wide eyes and think, wow, that's so interesting and unique. Long story short, next time you're out with your camera, think about the normal things that might have the potential to just vanish and disappear, because it might be the case that we're the photographers that only can see them right now. And that is how my photography mindset has completely been shifted lately. And like I say, when I've been walking around, driving around, whatever it may be, looking at stuff, I've been completely open to all these new photo possibilities that I would have just ignored in the past. Well, that's going to be it from me in this one. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.